Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Nonprofit, whereby we use this particular platform to mastermind among each other as nonprofit leaders. Today, I have a special guest, Claude-Paul Boivin. Claude-Paul is a CEO of 5 national trade and professional associations for over 30 years. He had also been part of the International Development Executive, working in developing countries for over 16 years. He's also used to be in the Army for over 8 years, and he's an honorary colonel and also a certified executive coach from Royal Roads University since 2013. It's quite a resume here. I have someone that's highly regarded in the Ottawa nonprofit, actually in all across Canada, but in particular, because I met Claude-Paul in the Ottawa market, I feel like you're super well regarded in the particular Ottawa market. Welcome, Claude-Paul.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Yes, so since I have someone who's super experienced here, I would love to pick your brain on a few things. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, on top of the impressive resume that you have. I know that you have been in the sector for so long. What drew you to the sector to begin with?
You know, I had spent 16 years working in international development. I lived in Africa, traveled extensively around the world. I also worked for a school board. So I worked internationally at the local level, and I always thought, wouldn't it be nice to be able to work nationally and discover Canada? You know, I knew Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, the airports, but I hardly had been to any of the other regions of the country. So I thought, working internationally would be very nice. So yes, so that was the reason for working internationally. But when I came back is the idea of working in Canada for associations. So there was an opportunity that came up with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. And I applied for the position. I think I was a maverick appointment at the time because I had no experience in associations, but somehow I was able to get the position. And I worked there for 10 years and really loved working with a board. You know, when you work with a board of an association, one of the advantages that you're the CEO, you meet your boss 4 times a year. That's when the board meets. You know, you do have a lot of latitude to imprint your style on an organization. So I was happy to join the association world. I didn't think at the time I was going to stay that long and work for that many organizations, but then I worked 7 years for a trade association, the Association of Canadian Engineering Companies. I did that, and then followed that 12 years with the Canadian Dental Association as CEO. And then just recently, I did the 2 interim appointments of 6 months each with the Hotel Association and the Tourism Association. So I was very fortunate in my career to get that broad experience in the association world. I was also very active with CSAE. I was the chair of the national board and very active in the organization, which, you know, CSAE, en passant, not to make publicity for them, but it was what I call my corporate silent mentor. I tried to go to every single availability of program, opportunity for learning. And certainly it's something that I would recommend to people who are in this area of work.
100%. I think it's the way that I describe the program to other people is, especially when I was going through it, is when it's like an MBA for nonprofit organization. It's not just for association management. Association management is the prime thing for it, prime theme. But the reality is that a lot of nonprofit organizations leader would be able to benefit from the teaching in the course itself. So it's fantastic. And you were also board chair of CSAE at some point. Yes, that's amazing. So I have a couple of questions, thinking out loud, drawing from your experience as well. You've been working abroad in developing countries for 16 years prior, and you've seen a lot, and you have a long career. Right now is an unprecedented time, and I felt like I use the word unprecedented all the time lately. But we are in a time of uncertainty, and so how do you, as a nonprofit organization leader, an association leader, how do you navigate these moments all together, and how do you make decisions when not all the information is available?
Right. Well, first of all, I think we've always been in years of uncertainty, and we've always been in unprecedented time because
Mm,
change is with us. Change is inevitable. It's constant, and we need to adapt to it. There was a funny line that the only person who likes change is a baby with a wet diaper, but it's true. I think we're going to have to realize that we deal with change all the time. Now, I would say that. In change, we need to be adaptable. We need to be ready. I've said to people publicly that I don't believe in strategic plans,
oh.
3 year strategic plans. I believe in strategic planning, but everywhere I've been, we've had a 3 year strategic plan. The last 2 years were really inoperative. So I believe in
Mm,
the annual strategic planning exercise where you really focus perhaps on a long term vision for the organization, the dream, where you want to be. Stephen Covey, he wrote a
mm,
book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective
hmm.
People. Well, habit
Love that
number
book.
2 says start with the end in mind and work
Mm,
backwards. And I think that's what we need to do. And if I had any advice to anybody in the association world, is worry first about where you want to be. And that's what's the most important. Strategic planning is not that complicated. It's 5 components: mission, which is vision, priorities, strategies, and action. And mission answers the question, why do you exist? What's your purpose?
mm,
Vision is all about the dream. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And priorities is what's important, what's most important. My mantra on priorities is, priorities exist so you can say no to good ideas that don't fit. And then you have strategies. That's the how.
mm.
And number 5, the action is, what do you do Monday morning? It's very simple. And if you follow that pattern, I think that, there's a way to get ahead. But when you talk about change and people have a 3 year strategic planning, it doesn't prepare them for change at all. I think I was in an interim position for 2 positions, and I was in year 3 of the 2 organizations. And
Mm.
the year 3 plan, the action plan, did not correspond to the reality because it had changed over 2 years. So it's all right to have, of course, a longer term vision, but I would start with that in dealing with change. Be ready to adapt, and adapt means you don't buy into a 5 year commitment of what you're going to do down the road. So yes, so how to deal with uncertainty? I'd say the very first thing is to know where you want to go, because uncertainty may change how you're going to get there. But if you know for sure where you're going and what your priorities are, then that's the what and the why and the how. I mean, you can adjust from year to year on the how. That's a lot easier. So I think I would ask people to compartmentalize things
Mm.
as to your fundamental purpose as an association, and then to be very, very flexible and adaptable on the how.
That's really insightful. In my business, which I think I can draw a lot of similarities running a business and also running a nonprofit organization, is that we do an annual meeting. This is the time of the year that we do our annual meeting for the upcoming year. And we do revisit as part of what I follow, the structure that I follow, we are required to really ask ourselves and review our mission and vision and values and also all of our strategies to make sure that we are aligned and we adjust it accordingly. So we don't really. I do agree 100% wholeheartedly that that 3 year is way too long to stay relevant to our day to day, and it's a great insight. Nobody else bought this up before. We have I think we do have like about 30 episodes that's being done, and nobody had brought this up. Thank you.
But of the 5 components, mission,
Mm,
vision, priorities, strategies, and action, I think the most important one is priorities, because you
mm,
cannot be a mile wide and an inch deep. You can't be all things to all people. And, I think strategic planning is as much about articulating clearly what you are not going to do as what you are
mm.
going to do. Sometimes I sound like Dr. No, but no is very important in life and your own personal life and in an association life. I was listening to Elon Musk's wife the other day on a podcast,
Mm,
and his ex-wife, by the way. And
mm,
she
mm, mm,
explained why he was a success. And she said there were two reasons why he was a success. Reason number one, he works hard.
mm,
Reason number two, he can say no. And he said, no for Elon Musk and no for me, for that matter, is actually a deep yes. It's a yes to focusing my energy, my time, my resources, and the work I do with colleagues. So no is not negative. No is actually positive because it tells you I'm not going to spend or waste any time on these things. And in association, every association I went to as a CEO, there's always been somebody on the board who has this idea, and there were the same two ideas every association I've been to, and I've been to five. One of them is, why don't we start an international program and help people in developing countries? And the other one is, why don't we start a charity? Well, I can tell you that I was involved in five, well, actually four charities that we had to
mm,
close down because there's a lot of enthusiasm for charity. You collect a lot of money, and the same thing happening every time. These charities sort of become independent. They lose contact with the father organization or the parental organization. Next thing you know, they're
mm.
independent. The next thing you know, they're competing with the creating organization. So I've seen that in four different organizations. So sometimes you have to say no, and sometimes there's I wouldn't a maverick board member. I wouldn't say a rogue board member. One board member that has an idea that just doesn't
Mm.
fit. And you have to be, as the CEO, explain to the board how this is going to be disruptive and it's going to distract you from what you do. So, yeah, I think priorities is a lot about saying no to other things that don't fit.
So, one thing that I picked up from the conversation that we have, and especially at the beginning when you were introducing, talking a little bit about your background, is that you mentioned that you love working with the board, which is a little bit unusual for executive director because the board change every year, pretty much. Like majority of them may have different terms and multiple year terms, but the entire board would change every few years as a minimum. So, and it's not often easy if you are a non-profit leader, an association leader, and they're essentially your boss. How do you handle those conversations or manage the board altogether to help you do your job and achieve the organization's objective while still remain diplomatic and happy relationship?
Well, the best part of my job was always the board meetings. There were only four
Oh.
years, so you knew that it wasn't going to be every day you meet your boss. So but why I was most happy about going there, because my saying is basically the staff manage today and the board manages tomorrow. And so
Mm,
the board is all about strategy and where we're going. And that's what's so important. And go back to Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind. Well, the board is that body that decides on what the goal would be. So if what is most important in an organization is to be clear on your goal, then I think the most important discussions are the ones at the board. Also, I loved working at the board because I was never an expert in any of the organizations. I was not a veterinarian. I was not an
mm,
engineer. I was not a dentist, not a hotelier. But we had staff that were. And I always loved having the staff there, take the spotlight and receive the
oh.
applause for the good work they did. So I always thought of myself as a bit of an orchestra conductor, right? So the
Mm,
board happened to be the audience, four times a year, and the musicians are the people there. And as you know, a conductor without an orchestra doesn't produce any music, although the orchestra can play without a conductor and do music. So yeah, I think working with the board, if you realize that the board is representing your members, and by the way, I believe any association's mission statement should translate into this. It may be articulated differently, but
mm,
the mission of any organization should be: we exist to make our members more successful. That's the
mm,
bottom line. Now, a lot of us think, well, maybe we're going to do this thing here for international development. We're going to, well, actually, there are governments that exist. There are not for, there are charities that exist, but we're in the business of promoting, protecting, advancing the interests of our members. And that interest, well, it's reflected at the board discussion. So to me, the board, it sets that light to which we're going to, steer the ship. The other line I like about the ship idea is that
Mm,
people often expect the CEO to steer the ship in the right direction, but never get
mm.
caught with your hands on the steering wheel, because you really want the board to own the organization. And it's called executive director. I always use the term executive director whenever I could, because
Mm.
my role was to execute the will of the board.
Oh, awesome. That is such a great it, I don't know if insight is the right word, but like analogy. I have one situation. I'm going to ask you a situational question here, not to test your expert knowledge, but I do truly have the question. Um, so when the let's you've been interim executive director for two organizations. Being interim is not easy. Um, Depending on the organizations, sometimes when there is a leadership change, sometimes it could be coming from the team, and the team has disagreement with the leader decide to leave. Now, if you're stepping in as someone brand new to the organization, and the current management team had different idea compared to the organizational objective, how do you turn this ship around?
Right. Well, I think there are two types of leadership. There's the directive
Mm,
leadership, which is probably the old time leadership. When I started my career,
mm,
55 years ago, it was directive leadership. The CEO ran things, and told people what to do.
mm.
But now I think we've evolved more to a democratic type of leadership, which is a consensus based leadership. So I think, I'm an executive coach and
Mm,
have been since 2013. Using the coaching approach is very good, where you seek out the talent and the opinion of people. In life, staff members or anyone, they want three things: they want to be seen, heard, and understood. So if people have an opportunity to be able to contribute their ideas, and at one point you have to accept that the decision that's made may not be aligned with what you think, but certainly we won't be taking a vote and see what the majority is. Sometimes the better wisdom comes from people who perhaps the board. Um,
mhm,
but as long, I think, as staff have an opportunity to contribute to the decision making. For example, a lot of associations deal with provincial and territorial associations.
mhm.
Sometimes they're federation. I've worked for a few that are federation-like models. Well, I think consulting the provincial associations way in advance of making big decisions,
Mm,
I think is very important. That we have this collaborative approach and consensus approach, because if people have been seen, heard, and understood, and it went another way, so I think they'll understand that, and at least they'll see, that there was a process in place, that they had an opportunity to contribute, and that they were heard. Um, Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, I was
Amazon. Yep.
listening to a podcast of him the other day, and he
Mm,
was explaining that for him there are two types of decisions in life.
yep.
There's the one door decision and the two-door decision. The two-door decision is a decision that if you make it and it's the wrong decision, you can take another door and rescue yourself, right?
Mm,
And then the one door decision is when you make a decision, you take it, and you're stuck there. So, uh, so he says he lets the two-door decisions done by his staff, and he leaves the
oh,
one-door decisions to himself. And the one-door decisions are those that lock you in. They would be strategic decision. Are we going to go into sea shipping or airline company? Once you've made
mm,
that decision, it's pretty hard to come back. Now, the tactics and the actions, the purchasing, those are two-door decisions. So I think in association you can sort of look at what's a one-door decision and what's the two-door decision.
mm,
Well, buying furniture is a two-door decision. I mean, if you don't like the furniture, it's not a lot of money. You can either saw the legs so they're the right height, or find new. But as a CEO, I think you need to know the difference between both and let people take those decisions that will not ruin or jeopardize the organization. So, so I think if you have a structure where people are consulted, people are informed, they have a chance to
Mm.
participate, and that you delegate some of those decisions that they can take, I think it's a way forward that can be helpful.
100%. I love this examples of two-door versus one-door decision as well. It resonate quite a bit. Organizations. I have another situation. Actually, I do have another situational question that I have to ask while I have Claude here. We do, from time to time, we are brought into organizations, and because of what we do as external accountant, sometimes we see messy situation. And when we see messy situation, we see that the CEO sometimes will be like by design, not by design, like just somehow ended up having to make every single decision, including purchasing a $20 gift card for a vendor or like making some really small decision. And he or she, the CEO, eventually become the bottleneck. That's also not efficient way of running the business. It echoes exactly what you mentioned before, like people should delegate. And I think a lot of people are having a hard time doing that delegation and stepping up and being the CEO. Now, what can an executive director do, a new executive director do to learn to be an efficient executive director?
Right. So I think I mentioned to you before this interview that I have a personal website. And if you go on my
Mm,
personal website, there are two articles at the very end. One
mm,
of them is 10 things that the association CEOs should never forget. And there's
mm,
another one are little tips about, running. So, but out of those 10 things, I think it's number 7 says the bottom line. I'm going to talk about finances just for a little while. The
mm,
bottom line is that the bottom line counts. No association can be successful unless they have good, solid financial management. Doesn't
mm.
matter. You could win the Nobel Peace Prize, but if the columns don't add up and the financial statements aren't solid, uh, be to no value. No CEO will succeed with that. So I'm glad that there's people like you helping people out with the finances.
Thank you.
In terms of delegating, what you should know, and some of my colleagues are shocked when they hear this. I've never been to a financial committee meeting of our associations in 32 years. I let the CFO go there, and hope that everything will clear out. But never been at the Canadian Dental Association. I don't even know who the accounting was. The accountants, I met them to say hello, but because I did want to separate that away. I didn't want to be forced to go and defend things like finances when there's somebody more competent than I that could do it. Um, so I think I think that the division of responsibilities is important, and that you trust people, you delegate things to people, and it's good for everyone because it won't always be done exactly like you would like it to be done, but it'll likely be done better because they're better at it than you would be. So it's a question of managing the energy of the CEO. I think it's their job to do that. Um,
How
when
did
if I can just talk about this just a little bit, in my coaching, all
mm,
of my clients were Americans. I worked for a company in San Francisco called Torch Leadership Labs.
mm,
And one of my favorite questions about to any of my clients was if somebody who knew you well were to describe who you were, what your qualities with 3 words,
mm,
not what would they say, but what would you like them to say? Because and most of the people will tell me things like, "Oh, I'm hardworking, I'm loyal, I communicate well, I'm collaborative,
mm-hmm.
I'm effective." Well, those are nice, but the people I coach want to become CEOs or they want to become vice presidents,
Yep.
and I tell them, "What do you think is missing in those descriptions?" Because I said those descriptions, by the way, the 3 that they come up with, That's their brand. That's what they aspire to be: hardworking,
Mm,
good communicators, good at finance management or whatever it may be. But what I asked them, what do you think is missing? And except one case out of maybe 50 clients, nobody got it. But the one that did get it said strategic. I want to be strategic, because strategic is all about trying to manage the future, trying to be ready for what's coming down the pike. It's good to be able to manage, but if you're going to be a leader, so you should be strategic. Your energy should be on that. You should be perceived as the strategy champion. So what does that leave the other staff to? Well, they can look at the other aspects of the business. So I think a good leader, if there were like my three words,
mm,
were strategic, decisive, and collaborative. That's what I would
mm.
like people to say about me. But unless you say strategic and that's your goal, then you're going to be managing today, and you won't shine, and you want to improve your brand.
That's so good. I have to say that that's really, really, really great coaching question. I have to come back and ask myself the same question. What would people say about myself? I love the word strategic. And it echoes what you mentioned earlier, that the CEO or the board is responsible for the future and the staff is responsible for the day to day. So it echoes that as well. And I love that it all aligns, and being the in between, and we have to be strategic. Okay. I do have. I've taken so much up. I've taken so much of your time, but I do want to wrap this up with a moment of high. Is there a particular win or the proudest moment that you have in your career that you could share with everyone, and that helps everyone to move or advance their career, or just something that you share?
Yes, a recent win. I think probably one of the biggest wins that I've had. And, as we work for an association, you're basically doing public policy advocacy, right?
Mm, yep.
I've been a lobbyist for 32 years, is what I've been. So influencing public policy, influencing government decision is my goal. I mean,
Mm,
uh, and we had at the Canadian Dental Association, we worked 8 years at that, trying to convince the government that there were a lot of people, maybe a third of the population, that could not access oral health, dental
yep.
care. And we would go to the government year after year after year after year and say, why don't you have targeted programs for vulnerable groups? Vulnerable groups would be seniors, would be
Mm,
children, would
mm,
be unemployed, the handicapped,
yep.
the homeless. And we were also never, we'll have farmer care before we have dental care. Well, sure enough, after all these years, and I remember being in the meeting with the NDP,
Mhm.
and they were going to go to government and say, we want universal dental care. And we said to them, uh, why universal? Universal is everybody. The government can't afford that. It can hardly afford targeted programs for vulnerable groups. So instead of going to the government, and they made part of that deal, they had to work with the Liberals for many years that there would be a
Mm,
dental care program. And farmer care was set to the side. But when they went for targeted programs for vulnerable groups that would be incrementally introduced, that was acceptable to the government. And now it's part of the government's, committed social programs. So for me, in terms of successes, and considering that my job was to lobby for 32 years, that probably was the biggest victory. And it wasn't done by me. It was done by ourselves with the provincial associations and with other like-minded groups, with social groups. So you have to get people together. My favorite uh, proverb, my favorite guiding light in life has always been the old African proverb that says you
mm,
can go fast alone or further together. I had that in every office I've had, placed in a way that I could never leave my desk without looking at this African proverb, which basically says, uh, don't go it alone. Government is not interested in hearing the same voices with the same arrogant tone, asking the same things for their own personal good. It's an idea of taking the higher ground, not the common ground, right? And by the way, in terms of, we talked about dealing with people, my second favorite quote
mm,
is from Maya Angelou, which said, you know, no matter, people will not remember what you said and did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So I think being nice to people uh, is key because you need to work with people. So being nice to
Yep.
people. I remember when I worked at the International Development Research Center, I was the chief of staff of the president. It's an organization with a $150 million budget. That's when I was
Mm.
overseas. And when he was made me the chief of staff, he brought me in and gave me just one directive, if you wish. And he said, there's a lot of people that are going to come through you to see me, told Paul. I want you to give them sugar. I didn't know what that meant really. But I left after and give them sugar meant don't be arrogant,
Mm.
don't be a jerk. Be nice to people. You're going to get more with sugar. So I think that's important in terms of managing staff.
Thank you, Claude Paul, for all the wisdom that you share. I've learned a few, I think, leadership and also strategic moment or lesson nuggets that I can apply even directly today to my business. So I appreciate all the sharing.
Great. And one thing, and I'll finish with this little saying, is
Mm,
that they say good judgment comes from experience, and
mm,
experience comes from bad judgment. After 32 years, I can list so many mistakes that I made, but you learn from those. Sometimes you make the mistakes over and over again, by the way, but you learn from them, and eventually,
you'll get
um,
it.
you get set on the right track. Thank you very much. It gave me an opportunity
Thank
to
you.
reflect back on the good time I've had working in associations.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and really appreciate it.
Great. Pleasure. Thank you very much.
As we wrap up, I want to share a bit more about what we do at Otis Financial Solutions. For the past 18 years, Otis Financial Solutions has been dedicated to enhancing the financial management and strategic planning capabilities of hundreds of associations and nonprofits across Canada. Our extensive experience has enabled us to deliver tailored financial solutions that drive growth and enhance sustainability for nonprofits and associations. If you are interested in learning more about how Otis Financial Solutions can support your organization, I would love to offer you a no obligation 20-minute call. Let's discuss your unique challenges and explore how we would be able to help you achieve your goals.